Hello, my name's Alisha Dacus. Sorry for the kind of cramped quarters. There's a little mix-up with getting the room. Anyway, I'd like to get started. Let me just start my clock so I don't go too much. Today I'll be talking about academic language and the English language learner. Getting an idea of academic language in the classroom and how English language learning students understand this kind of complex language versus conversational language. So we're going to start with what exactly is academic language. Academic language is the language that is used in the classroom for classroom lessons by the teacher and among students when talking about the lessons. It's also what's in the textbooks and what's written on exams. And so it's basically just school language, like things that we use for kind of educational purposes and academic learning. Has kind of a more formal base to it, like more Greek and Latin roots. And it's pretty different from conversational language. A lot, like I said, a lot more formal. And yeah, here's some examples. Academic language has a lot more variety in its vocabulary, and there's a lot more transitional words like however and in addition. As compared to a lot of ands and buts in conversational language. Also, academic language is not very slang related, while informal kind of conversational language has a lot more slang to it. And an example I found was in a scientific classroom. Some examples of academic language would be like cycle or ecosystem, or in a math classroom it would be like sum, dividend, words like that, kind of words that are more academic that you don't hear as often, but are actually really important for having in the classroom. So why do students need academic language? A lot for classroom participation and like talking about the lesson with their teacher and their peers. The reading and writing, like writing essays. Academic language is seen a lot in textbooks. And understanding concepts. A lot of this academic language has to do with learning the lesson, and their meanings have to do with the concepts that are being taught. Also, just for future professional environments. Like I said, it has kind of a more formal tone to it. So, in work environments, job interviews, these kind of things. These are when kind of more formal academic language comes into play. So, now we have to talk about the English language learner. There's kind of three main types. Of course, there are more, but these are just kind of our main three. There are those who are newly arrived but had education from the country that they came from. So they don't speak English, but they've had education. There's those arriving with limited academic experience, so they're learning the language and trying to kind of catch up academically. And then there's the long-term English language learner who's been in America for a good amount of time, probably like 10 years or so at least. It varies. But they're also trying to learn the language because it's probably what they probably speak their native language at home. So they have a lot of struggles with conversational. So they have acquired the language, but they haven't quite grasped academic language, kind of more formal. So they can speak and they can communicate with people, but they just have more trouble with academic language in the classroom. And sometimes they're called SELs, or standard language learners, because they're learning kind of more, like they're doing more of the learning versus the acquiring of the language. So now there's English language learners and academic language. There's a lot of misconceptions and errors. There's kind of like a cycle that kind of goes with it. So students, a lot of times when they're learning a language and they come across an academic word or phrase that they don't understand, they'll hear it in class, but so they'll memorize it. And so then they can answer questions using this language, and the teacher will kind of get the idea that they understand it because they're using this language. However, then they'll get their exams. And this isn't always the case, but a lot of times what happens is they don't do so well on essays or exams because they don't understand the meanings of these words, because these words are new to them and they're kind of more complicated words, such as the word cycle. I mean, yeah. So they end up doing poorly on exams. There's frustration both ways. So this is why we're addressing this, because we don't want them to have these kind of troubles. So yeah, I kind of talked about this a little early. Excuse me, a little earlier. So now these are some things, some strategies to kind of keep in mind when we're working with English language learners in regards to academic language. Academic language first must be introduced and reinforced. So we want to like introduce it to our students and then keep using it. Kind of repetition is the key to learning kind of idea. So we're going to start with first with when you're starting a lesson, preview some of the academic language that's going to be used in the lesson, and identify these and kind of have them repeated. So just point them out like, hey, this is cycle. It's going to be a word that we're going to need to know. So, and then an idea to do is to write these on a word wall or like a class dictionary, or encourage students to use a dictionary. Also, what you can do is have students write these words in their own dictionaries, like their personal notebook dictionaries. So they're writing the definition themselves, and writing it and repeating it can kind of lock in that understanding of the words. Academic language can also be more than just content area vocabulary. Like I said, it's kind of the more formal classroom speak. A good way to enforce academic language is to use visuals and acting, such as when I was in first grade, we were learning about solids, liquids, and gases, and we were acting them out. You know, we were being all tight together for solids, moving around for gas, things like that. And I've never forgotten what solid, liquid, and gas is, kind of from my first grade experience. Thank you, Mrs. Pottle. Anyway, also another thing to do is use translations and synonyms for the word, and kind of like have other words that mean the same thing, so they're like, oh, it means the same as process, or some other word like that, or it could mean something the same in their native language, and so they'll make that connection. And like I said, ask those ELL students for a possible translation, so then they can make that connection. Also, something to keep in mind is functional vocab. These are kind of words that we think are commonly used, but they might not be known to as many students, whether they're ELL or English speaking. So some examples are cycle, habitat, environment, sum. These are kind of common words that we kind of get the feeling that people know, but it's good to go back over them in case there's that lack of understanding, because this is academic language. So these are abstract or kind of thought to be commonly known. So provide scaffolding by doing some of the techniques I was just talking about, by like modeling and like using the new language. And then that's a little out of order. We're talking about assessments now. Sorry, my presentation went a little weird. So a quality exam shows what a student knows. We're talking about assessments. And directly assesses the objectives and the vocabulary that's been used. So we want to understand if they know what we think they know, kind of like the problems we were talking about earlier. So some suggestions for a good quality exam for students, especially English language learners who are learning this new academic language. Use written responses with a rubric and have them write out what they like, instead of just true or false. Like, avoid true or false and multiple choice when they're learning this new academic language. Instead, use written responses with a rubric, so then they know what they're expected, or what's expected of them, and they can write out and kind of explain their thinking. So then even if they don't use the language just right, you can still see if they're understanding it. Also, presentations, like I'm doing now, I'm showing that I understand what academic language is through a presentation instead of taking an exam on it. But yeah, presentations where they can speak it out and talk out their thought processes and how they understand. Also, group work is a good way to do this, so they have their peers to kind of scaffold and rely upon them. So that is about... Oh, sorry, got one more little slide. So basically, in conclusion, academic language is a really necessary part of the classroom. It's how we speak and communicate about concepts that we're learning and teaching. And so this is really needed for English language learners to be fitting into the classroom and understanding these new concepts while also acquiring the language. So it's important to involve them and support them as much as they need it by some of these strategies that I was just talking about. It's really important to just understand that this is part of a whole new language that they're learning, and just really support them and assess them in the right way so that they can show you what they know. So yeah, incorporating academic language is very important for both English language learners and English speaking students. So provide all that you need. Thank you so much for, where are we going? Hey, look, assessments again. Technology, gotta love it. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a great day.